Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most scandalous and fascinating royal stories of all time. The tale of King Edward VIII. You might know him as the king who gave up the throne for love. But the story is so much more complex, and frankly, a lot juicier than that. So, grab your tea, get comfy, and let's unravel the life of the man who was king for less than a year. Our story starts with Prince Edward, or David, as his family called him. Born in 1894, he was the eldest son of King George V and Queen Mary. From the very beginning, he was destined for the throne. He was charming, handsome, and the media darling of his time. Think of him as the Prince Harry of the 1920s, a global celebrity who toured the British Empire, greeted cheering crowds, and set fashion trends. He was the most eligible bachelor in the world, and everyone was obsessed with who he would eventually marry. But behind the dazzling public image, David was a man deeply unhappy with the rigid constraints of royal life. He found court protocol stuffy and outdated. He longed for a more modern, private existence, far from the prying eyes of the public and the endless royal duties. This internal conflict, this push and pull between duty and desire, would come to define his entire life and legacy. He felt like a prisoner in a gilded cage, and he was constantly looking for a way out. And that way out appeared in the form of an American woman named Wallis Simpson. Now, Wallis was not your typical royal bride-to-be. She was confident, intelligent, and fiercely independent. More scandalously, she was a commoner, and when she met Edward, she was not only already married to her second husband, Ernest Simpson, but she was also a divorcee. In the deeply conservative 1930s, this was a massive red flag for the British establishment. The two met at a party in 1931, and the prince was instantly smitten. Wallis was different from the aristocratic young women he was used to. She was witty, she wasn't intimidated by his royal status, and she treated him like a man, not a prince. For Edward, who craved normalcy, this was intoxicating. Their friendship quickly blossomed into a full-blown affair. He showered her with lavish gifts, jewels, and money, and she became the center of his world. The royal family and the British government were horrified. They saw Wallis as a scheming, ambitious woman who had a dangerous hold over the future king. But Edward didn't care. He was completely and utterly devoted to her. He would even leave official state business to take her phone calls. He was a man possessed by love, or perhaps obsession. Then, in January 1936, the unthinkable happened. King George V died, and Prince David ascended the throne as King Edward VIII. The man who had spent his life trying to escape his destiny was now the monarch of the United Kingdom and the head of the vast British Empire. The entire world watched, holding its breath. Would he finally settle down, leave Wallis Simpson, and fulfill his duty? Spoiler alert, he would not, as King Edward's behavior became even more erratic. He ignored government papers, challenged long-standing traditions, and made it clear that he intended to marry Wallis, come what may. He was determined to make her his queen. This created an unprecedented constitutional crisis. The Prime Minister, Stanley Baldwin, along with leaders from across the Commonwealth, made it crystal clear that people would never accept a twice-divorced American commoner as their queen. The Church of England, of which the king was the head, forbade the remarriage of divorced people. It was a complete and total impasse. The government presented Edward with an ultimatum. He had three choices. 1. Give up Wallis. 2. Keep Wallis and force the government to resign, triggering a massive political crisis. Or 3. The option no one thought he'd actually take, abdicate the throne. For weeks, a silent battle raged behind the palace walls. Edward tried to find a compromise. What if they had a morganatic marriage, where Wallis would be his wife but not his queen, and their children would have no claim to the throne? The government rejected it. The lines were drawn. It was the crown or the woman he loved. On December 10, 1936, after just 326 days on the throne, King Edward VIII made his choice. In a historic radio broadcast that was heard by millions around the globe, he announced his decision to abdicate. His famous speech included the unforgettable line, "I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king as I would wish to do without the help and support of the woman I love." The next day, he was no longer king. His younger, shy brother, Albert the man we know as King George VI, Queen Elizabeth II's father, was thrust onto the throne. Edward, now styled as the Duke of Windsor, left England, effectively exiled from the country he was born to rule. He married Wallis Simpson in France in 1937. The royal family did not attend. In a particularly cruel move, his brother, the new king, denied Wallis the title of Her Royal Highness. This was a slight that Edward would resent for the rest of his life. He felt betrayed by his own family. But the story doesn't end there. In fact, it gets even darker. As World War II loomed, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor's actions became deeply questionable. In 1937, they visited Nazi Germany and famously met with Adolf Hitler. The Duke was seen giving what looked like a Nazi salute, and there were widespread fears that he held pro-Nazi sympathies. The idea was that if Germany won the war, perhaps they would install him as a puppet king of Great Britain. This was a huge embarrassment for the British government. To keep him out of trouble, Winston Churchill appointed him governor of the Bahamas for the duration of the war. It was a glamorous but ultimately powerless position designed to keep him far, far away from the European conflict and any potential intrigue. After the war, the Duke and Duchess lived a life of luxurious exile. They became international socialites, flitting between Paris and New York, throwing extravagant parties, and living a life of leisure. Funded by a generous allowance from the royal family, but they were never truly happy. Edward was a man without a purpose. He had given up everything for love, but he was left with a sense of emptiness and regret. He desperately missed his home, his family, and the role he had been raised for. He was never fully welcomed back into the royal fold. While he made occasional visits to England for family funerals, Wallis was never officially received by the Queen. They remained outsiders, a painful reminder of a crisis that nearly brought down the monarchy. Edward died from cancer in 1972 in Paris. His body was flown back to England to be buried in the royal burial ground at Frogmore, near Windsor Castle. A week later, his niece, Queen Elizabeth II, visited a frail and grieving Wallis. It was a quiet, final act of reconciliation. Wallis passed away 14 years later and was buried beside him. So, what is the legacy of Edward VIII? Was he a romantic hero who sacrificed a kingdom for the woman he loved? Or was he a selfish, irresponsible man who shirked his duty and flirted with his country's enemies? The truth, as it often is probably somewhere in the middle. His abdication had a profound impact. It reshaped the monarchy, forcing his brother to become a reluctant but ultimately successful king, and paving the way for Queen Elizabeth II's long and stable reign. In a way, his dereliction of duty may have saved the institution he abandoned. It forced the monarchy to modernize and adapt in a way it might not have otherwise. The story of Edward and Wallis is a timeless tale of love versus duty, of personal desire versus public responsibility. It's a complex, messy, and deeply human story that continues to captivate us even today. It reminds us that even for those born into unimaginable privilege, life and love are never simple. What do you think? Was Edward right to abdicate? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. It's a debate that has raged for decades, and I'd love to hear your take on it. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into royal history, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. We'll see you in the next video.